Okay, so we're in. We're live.
Okay.
How are you doing?
Very well.
Very well. Chris, thank you so much for swinging by.
Yeah.
It's been a while since we reached out and chatted, but your background's super interesting to me.
Yeah. We have parallel paths in some ways.
Yeah.
I was never the adventure star that you are, but for a long time I was adventure world adjacent. My cousin was a big wall climber.
Oh, amazing. Beautiful.
Yeah. So I ended up living in Flagstaff for a while and hanging out with his crew years ago. And since then, I think all of our films have premiered at Mountain Film.
Okay, beautiful. Yeah. Flagstaff's amazing, isn't it?
Flagstaff's amazing, and this festival in Telluride, incredible too. It's half mountaineering, adventure, kayaking, and then the other half is like social impact films. And so it's kind of a cool blend of do-gooders and people that really understand how deep nature can be.
Yeah, no, that sounds wild. I'll have to check it out. I've never been to Telluride before, but that would be a great reason to go.
Should go. Actually, the festival is Memorial Day.
Is it this week, Memorial?
Sorry, it's Memorial Day this year, so it'd be May 24th, 26th.
Okay. I'm so lost on all the holidays. Like I've lived abroad for 25 years. So obviously all the holidays when I was living in China were different. I was in Shanghai for 18 years. And then I was in Dubai for most of COVID. So that was about 4 years. And then I just got here in November.
How do you like being back in the States?
It's great. I think when I was young, I had this idea of like storytelling and making content. And then I also had this idea of like the difficulty I felt like I was going to have if I just tried to come to LA and do things. So what I did is I just went abroad and I started telling stories, writing, doing photography. And I got in with the New York Times and Time, Newsweek, Forbes, Fortune. And then I moved into television, and being abroad definitely accelerated my progress in being able to make a living as a freelancer. And then it definitely accelerated my progress in producing and directing my own content. And then now I feel like I've got so much stuff behind me. I've put out almost 50 hours worth of like adventure content all around the world. Now it's great to come back to LA because people actually want to talk to you and people actually want to develop stuff with you. Whereas if I was here in my 20s with nothing behind me, it would have been an uphill battle. I just would have been getting coffee probably all the time, which is mind numbing.
Upside of getting older too.
Yeah.
You have more experience and people take you more seriously. Even if they should have taken you seriously when you're young,
Yeah.
you find you get a little more respect as you get more ancient.
Absolutely. The hierarchy is alive and well in LA.
And I had sort of a similar experience. I went to college on the East Coast. My dad famously said that he'd only pay for college if I left the West Coast because you know all about California.
But I looked at your bio. You went to NYU. I mean, you've studied filmmaking.
Yes, I did.
Yeah.
At the end, but it took me a while to get there. I started international relations, and in order to really survive college, my plan was to get out. We were in upstate New York. I was at Colgate, and so by the sophomore year, I was on study abroad programs, and I began to realize that me getting out of the United States was really an important way of understanding who I was and the stories I wanted to tell and what I wanted to do with my life.
Yeah.
I think by the senior year, I realized I wanted to do filmmaking and be around artists. And so that's how I ended up at NYU.
And what better place than New York City?
Yes, it was a really amazing place to be. It still is incredible. I mean, a lot of the generation, of course, have moved on and the money issues have become more acute and it's become safer and less edgy, but I still love that city.
Yeah, it's got a special place, I think, in a lot of people's hearts. So where were you born originally?
I grew up in Palo Alto.
Oh, okay.
My parents, my mom was from Wyoming. My dad came out from Boston. They met through the military, and they ended up somehow in Palo Alto in the late 50s. Very different Palo Alto than we have today.
Yeah, before Silicon Valley and everything, right?
Before,
yeah.
And
Stanford was still a big presence there, though.
Stanford was the presence.
Yeah.
It was about being close to Stanford, and HP was just getting going, and some of the early Silicon Valley stuff.
Like Intel, right? Didn't like half of the military-industrial complex go through Intel?
Well, a lot of the supercharging, of course, came from Vietnam, and HP was making signal processors, and Intel was making early chips. My dad knew a lot of those folks as he was getting involved. He was interested in oceaneering, of all things.
Oh, that's amazing.
Jacques Cousteau, and we had like the first aqua lung that Cousteau had developed. I remember selling it at a garage sale in the early 70s. If we could get that back.
That'd be amazing. Like, because the stuff that they were using to go underwater in the 50s, 60s, and 70s is ridiculous compared to like James Cameron going down the Mariana Trench in a sub that cost like $100 million.
Yes. Yeah. So it was very rudimentary. We tried a lot of them out in our backyard swimming pool growing up.
So that would have been fun.
Yeah, kind of fun in retrospect. I guess things can't go too wrong in your swimming pool.
Yeah.
But so Dad was interested in like oceaneering, everything from salmon ranching and raising oysters to renting space on satellites to help do private weather forecasting for container ships.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah.
But along the way, a lot of the people that were in what became venture capital were also doing silicon chips and working with Intel and all those companies. So I was lucky to have a pretty cool tech part of my childhood.
That's wild.
And meanwhile, my parents got into environmental issues.
Right, because I noticed you're on Friends for the Earth, the board.
Yes, I've been on the board for 10 years after our films made me an official environmentalist. But growing up, it was more like my mom had a group called Environmental Volunteers, which would go into schools and help, teachers educate their kids about environmental issues. And my dad, sort of by circumstance, helped start a group called the Peninsula Open Space Trust. And in the Bay Area at the time, the idea was we don't want to be like Los Angeles. And the Irvine Company, a lot of these companies came in and did these massive tract houses. And there was fear that the Bay Area, too, would develop.
Just like urban sprawl, like Los Angeles?
Well, urban sprawl.
Yeah.
And so they started one of these land trust companies, like the Nature Conservancy, only this was Bay Area based. And what they would do is they would raise money and then they would buy private land. And then when the public passed a bond issue, then they would sell it to the state. So they'd create this network of parks that would become a green belt around the peninsula. So I got a lot of exposure as a kid to environmental issues, which I'm very grateful for.
And then the deal was that your dad wanted to send you to the East Coast. He wanted to get you out of California.
I think my dad was tired of me.
Fair enough.
Because you know all about California. Figure out about the East Coast.
Yeah. Two totally different worlds. So what was high school like for you? I mean, like, did your high school have like an audio video like center? Like, where did you have a chance to work with cameras and tape and this kind of thing? Did you have any feel for this before you left California?
Question. Well, my friend Roger and I really loved Super 8 movies, and in those days, if you like, of course, Wes Anderson and a lot of the filmmakers that are my age from that era we had were Super 8 cameras. So we made movies in high school. We made a spoof of the In Search of series, which were sort of early, In Search of the Loch Ness Monster, In Search of this and that. We had an In Search of Big Nose. Of course, right here, I have one, but we're making one about the mythological Big Nose. And it was a lot of fun because we had our friends come in and got to make these elaborate props and things like that. So I think by the time high school was over, I love filmmaking. Just
Sure, yeah. I mean, with film, it was miserable. At least my first connection with filmmaking, I played Division I basketball in Canada, and we used to look at tape all the time, and we used to have to use these like jump shuttles to go back and forth and like reviewing the tape, bringing it back, cutting. No, this was like mid to late 90s. Yeah. Totally different, but we would look at tape. We would look at tape, game tape, right?
Yeah.
And we would have to like make edits in the game tape and put little sequences together to show some of the other players or to show the coaches, something we met. And I remember like we had like a little audio video center in our basketball like gymnasium,
right.
And we were able to go in there and use this stuff and look at tapes and stuff. And I just remember how much fun it was editing just basketball games in the early days, and then actually getting a chance to tell
stories.
Where did
you play in basketball?
I was at the University of Toronto, so I grew up in Canada.
So you played university level sports?
I did, yes, yeah, which was wild. Yeah, the whole thing, yeah, it was amazing. Because actually, in my story, I talk a lot about, and I talk a lot about it here on the podcast. Is like, I grew up, training like 3-4 hours a day from the age of 6 to the age of 22. So I grew up with no hobbies other than my sporting career, and it wasn't until I wasn't good enough to play professional, and then moved to China that I was able to figure out I loved storytelling, and then I had all the time and the energy to actually pursue that passion. But actually, from the age of 6 to 22, I didn't grow up very well-rounded at all because I had no time or energy to pursue anything other than my sporting career. So you just get this, you don't learn anything about anything. And it was painful. But then going to China, it was like, it was just 1,000 flowers were blossoming in my brain, and I had all these ideas and time and energy, and it was beautiful.
Yeah, it's great. It's great to be out of your own culture because you can start to see what's actually important to you.
Yeah. I think the world would be a better place if everyone in the United States lived abroad for at least 1 year and then came back to the United States with fresh ideas.
If everyone in the world could live somewhere else for a little while.
Yeah.
No, it's true. Yeah, I think my epiphany on storytelling came at Colgate when I was a junior.
Where is Colgate exactly?
That's a good question.
I have no idea. I know it's East Coast, but is it in Connecticut or Massachusetts? Or
Well, it could be anywhere out there, but it happens to be south of Syracuse and
New York State?
Yeah, it's upstate New York.
Okay.
Beautiful farming area. I mean, you have that college on the hill, beautiful falls. It's a very good school. It was not quite right for me, but that's why it was perfect for me, because I figured out how maybe I was a little different and how I wanted to fit in. But
So you didn't have the idea of going to Colgate to do filmmaking or take your storytelling a little bit further?
completely motivated by competition.
Okay, great.
Yes, well, this is what you get for going to an all-boys school in the 70s, and I was competitive, and that was the best school I got into. And Colgate's an excellent school academically. It changed my politics, really. I wanted to be a pilot in the Air Force, and I took a course there called Problems of War and Peace, and I thought it was going to be war games. And it was really about, everything from carpet bombing in Vietnam to the collateral damage that you get from warfare. And I said, don't want to be in the military like my family had been.
Yeah.
Kind of a shift.
Yeah, for sure. That would have been huge. Yeah. Well, this would have been in what, like the 70s, 80s?
Yeah, I was in the Reagan years.
Okay.
And they were rolling out, big weapon systems and stuff, and it was just too much. And I had studied strategic arms limitations, which is, how to keep the Russians, how to keep us from a Cold War disaster. And I went to a bar one night, and for some reason at the bar, this came up, arms treaties. And I go, oh, this is great. I know this topic. I know this topic so well. And it's kind of my turn to talk. And I said, oh, well, the SALT II treaty would be a very good thing for us to do for this reason and this reason. And a guy across the table from me who was 3 times more charismatic than me and twice as good looking goes, you can't trust the Russians. And I went, oh, hooray, applause. And I just completely lost. But I had the information.
Mm.
And it made this, I realized that ideas are moved because of charisma and emotion way more than they are because of intellectual spreadsheets about what's maybe the thing.
Wow, you figured that out early. This is where we are now with all politics.
I know. It's true.
Yeah. It doesn't, what's actually being said, it makes no difference at all. It's just about delivering it with charisma and confidence.
Confidence and also knowing who your audience is. And, at that bar, people wanted to have a good time. They didn't want to have to think about a bunch of stupid stuff that I had studied in the paper. So that was like, okay, I'm going to go to acting school I went to for a year in New York, and then film school. And I said I was going to rebuild my whole thing.
Yeah. So sorry, did you act in high school? Like, was that an active pursuit as well?
Yes, I did. I loved it.
Yeah.
It was really fun. But, I'm not destined to be an actor, although I love the craft of acting.
Well, that's beautiful because obviously you're a better producer and director, the more you understand also what's going on in front of the camera.
Yeah, and I think growing up, waspy culture where you didn't express yourself emotionally very often, except...
Yeah, you got to hold everything in until you have a mental breakdown, right?
or that once-a-year fight with your mom or something.
Yeah.
It's just too much. And acting school was, Sandy Meisner was still alive, and I got into the school because I told them I wanted to be like Sidney Paul.
Okay, very charismatic, yeah.
Very charismatic. He was an actress director. I knew I didn't have a chance to get in as an actor, so I said I want to be a director, and like Sidney Pollack. And so Meisner let me into school with like these incredible actors, and I got to see, how how beautiful this craft is on a deep level. And especially I thought the way Meisner taught it about specificity and using fantasy as a way of moving emotion. And
Yeah, one of the best.
yeah, well, one of the best.
Yeah.
Crazy guy, but he had at that point he had a laryngectomy, so he, oh my God, this, like this, and he was absolutely terrifying.
Did you see that show on Netflix with Michael Douglas, the Kaminsky Method? Yeah, he did a little thing with Alan Arkin, as he had his like own little acting school, and it was quite a nice little series.
Oh, I've heard.
Yeah, or the Fonz had his thing with Barry, right, on HBO with what's his real name, Henry Winkler, right?
Yes.
That was beautiful as well, and I love Barry.
I did too. The way that it worked on what acting was about.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think one moment I won't forget with Meisner was he would come in and say, "Yeah, what's your name?" And you'd be really afraid because the great master was talking to you. It'd be like, Chris Paine, because you don't know your name, Chris Paine. It's like, and they just really on you, right? Where are you from? It's like, Palo Alto. You don't even know where you're from.
Yeah.
It says you don't know your name and you don't know where you're from.
Yeah. Was it a confidence thing?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Clearly. And also maybe being a pleaser and wanting not to say the wrong thing or something like that.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big balance in being empathetic to try to read the room, but also to be confident and know what you want to say.
So how did your parents take it when you told them that you were dropping out of your university program in upstate New York and moving to the city to pursue acting and directing and art, basically? Because that's a big move, and I mean that must have been a tough conversation.
Yeah, the way it happened, I did graduate, and then I announced I was going to go to New York, and they were not happy about going to New York to study to be an actor at the time. And they're mostly afraid because New York was really pretty tough in 1980. But also,
That was before they'd cleaned it up properly.
yeah.
Yeah.
And on top of that, maybe was AIDS come on already? I mean,
Yeah, 80s, early 80s. That was just starting.
1983. So you have New York and what I acted. It was pretty terrifying for my parents. And they came to visit me like 4 months into my trip there. And unfortunately for them, they arrived on this week that we were doing emotional preparation. And I could not feel this emotion. I did all this emotional preparation about my dog getting run over by a car in a very specific way. And still, I had no emotion in the scene. And I went downstairs to meet my parents to go to dinner, and my mom like reaches over. As soon as she touches my hand, just bawling for
God.
about 10 minutes.
Mom, we got to go back upstairs. I need you for this scene. Freaking in class, yeah.
They're like, we got to get this kid out of the city. This is horrible. He's being destroyed.
There's something about being destroyed, though. There's something about being destroyed and then getting to put back all the pieces and try to figure it out and build yourself back stronger, right?
It's true. It's a hero's journey, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel really grateful.
Yeah. I think, I mean, that's why I'm here. Like, you know, like we've all kind of been destroyed a little bit by COVID, especially if you're in the storytelling and the content creation world, right? And, you know, unless you're an Instagrammer or you're doing something else that you can just shoot from home at it. But if you're out traveling the world or you need to be on airplanes or you need to collaborate with other people, you've had a pretty slow couple of years. And yeah, part of my rebuilding process was coming back here and trying to reconnect with people and get new projects off the ground and things like that.
Now, how important is connecting to you?
On an emotional level or on a professional level?
Well, both.
Connecting with people is crucial, right? Like being a loner is not great. But I loved traveling and I loved making the shows for so many years. And I had the same crew. You know, we worked together for almost 10 years, connecting with people abroad, these guides and these porters and these people that we would use to help facilitate our journey, like up mountains and across deserts, and connecting with these people out in the middle of nowhere builds such a strong connection and a bond with people, right? It was really lovely. And then to have to like watch all that kind of disappear during COVID was quite challenging. And then of course I studied international politics and US politics and at the University of Toronto. So watching COVID unfold and how something that was a biological issue then became a political issue was very kind of frustrating as well. And also like I was in Ethiopia filming when COVID shut down the world in March 2020. And I barely got out of Ethiopia, and then I couldn't even get back into Dubai, which is where I was a resident at the time. And I ended up having to go to Istanbul, Turkey for 4 months and I was basically stuck there during.
Did you quarantine somewhere?
Yeah, in Istanbul, like just in a hotel. So that was kind of shit. But
how many times did they test you while you were in the hotel?
none actually. Like Turkey was very wide open and quite free to travel around during COVID. All the restaurants and stuff were closed, but the city was open and the grocery stores were open and the pharmacies were open, and people would kind of go out for walks and things like that. And the government stayed open. The government didn't like close government services, but most of the other private services were closed. So it's actually an okay place to be. It was just frustrating that I couldn't be where I wanted to be. And for a decade before that, I was traveling 250 days a year on 5 continents doing everything. So for it all to stop, and then to be in a foreign country where I didn't have my crew and didn't have my team, it was kind of strange.
It's strange talking about COVID in a way, because I feel like we're at this moment where we're finally over COVID. It means that it's now like the Great Blue or something. And it's almost like, even me, I feel like I almost don't want to talk about those 2 years because I feel like I'm still sort of processing them. And we were very lucky because we had a baby in 2019. And so we were at home with a child, which is, I mean, we were afraid. We didn't want the baby to get COVID. We didn't want to get sick, supermarkets and so forth. But on the other hand, we all this family time together. And so I was okay with my professional career being put on hold because it was like this. But then you really realize that the pandemic really changed a lot of things fundamentally.
For sure, yeah. In all of us, I think, especially us storytellers and people who are creative. Because if you were self-employed I say that COVID killed freelancers. Like COVID killed the self-employed amongst us. If you were a freelance cameraman or a freelance editor or a freelance music composer or sound mixer or whatever, you got just destroyed during COVID. The government gave out some free money every now and then, but at the end of the day, a lot of my partners and colleagues ended up having to take full-time jobs in other industries where they couldn't even necessarily use some of their filmmaking skills that they had executed with me at a very high level, and just to kind of survive. Yeah, it's crazy times.
I was thinking a little bit about what you're talking about, connecting, and I too really thrive on connecting. I think maybe more than just connection is very important to me in my work and profession and personally. But I remember going to India to chase a girl, and I finally tracked her down in Dharamsala, and they go, "Oh, you're looking for Kendall? Well, she's or whatever her Tibetan Buddhist name was."
Oh, interesting. Okay, yeah.
She's on a 4-month, solitary meditation in a cave up in, northern Mongolia or something. And for Kendall and for a lot of people that I know like this, even John, when he was rock climbing, they really love the solitary part of their professions or their practice. Mm-hmm. So it's connecting. It takes lots of different forms, I guess.
I agree. Yeah. And I think that would be too much isolation for me. I like kind of being out in the middle of the world or in the middle of nowhere with my team, because I had such a great team working with them and stuff like that, and to be kind of out on the edge of the world with them, with my own little group, and we're making stuff and we're telling stories about the people we're meeting and the places we're going. That kind of isolation excites me a lot because it gets you out of the garbage of all the politics and domestic politics and the news cycle and everything that rots your brain. Especially in North America, if you're English speaking. Yeah.
I agree. I try to leave the States every few years just for a refresher. It's great to see things in perspective too. Like when you watch, if you're in another country and you see what their popular TV show is or something in Chile and you realize that the own things which are popular and back in the States are just relative.
Yeah, everything is relative, basically. Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, nobody cares that whatever is so important to you back at home and vice versa.
Yeah. Well, that was one reason why I moved to China when I was 22. Like, I graduated from school and I was just like, I need to go someplace totally different. Like, different culture, different customs, different religion, different television, different everything. Because I needed to just open up something inside me that, hadn't been opened yet. And I had this, craving for that.
So my excuse for running off about that point in my career was moving to Los Angeles after acting school.
Okay, hold on. So you went to New York for acting school, but then did you also go to NYU at this time?
My senior year of college was at NYU.
Okay, so you went. Okay, so you
graduate.
Yeah.
And I did a summer at AFI. I was just trying to pack everything in. And when the neighborhood playhouse finished up, I came back to California for.
What was the neighborhood playhouse?
That was Meisner's school.
Oh, okay. So you were actually training there and then also putting on performances there?
Mostly it was just almost all training and then working in a restaurant.
Okay.
Like just trying to get by. And but some of my colleagues from that, Mark McDermott, who became Dylan McDermott.
Okay, yeah.
Successful acting career. And Allison Janney was in our school.
Oh, Allison Janney, yeah.
Ron and Steve Rogers, who wrote I, Tonya. I mean, it was a fantastic alternative to the diplomats and future international relations people that I had studied with at Colgate. And like you, I love international relations.
Yeah.
It's just diplomacy is so frustrating. Thank goodness people do it, but then you end up against hardcore charisma like a Putin right now or something like this, and you get nowhere.
You get nothing back. It's painful.
Yeah, it is painful. So, but eventually I got to Los Angeles. And
how did you make that decision to relocate to Los Angeles? Because obviously there must have been work or auditions or other schools in New York. So did you miss California, or was this like part of a wave of young, talented people who started going to LA randomly?
Oh, that's a good question. I think
because everyone I talk to in LA has a story about how they got to LA. Right. And all of it is leaving home or, convincing your parents that you're going to give this a try. Like we all have this in us, right? Like I came from Dubai. Like I came back to be in the kind of epicenter of entertainment, because I wanted to pursue that part of my career. I'm just curious, like, you must have been like 22, 23.
22, 23. I came back to San Francisco. Of course, we would never come to LA because if you grew up in Palo Alto when I did in the 70s and 80s, LA is like the devil. There's steel and water. It's all superficial people. Why would you ever want to go to LA?
That's why we're here. It's great.
Let's go back for here. That's why is this really why?
Yeah. But I fit in perfectly. I didn't know why.
I didn't know why. It took me that long to figure it out. So I was in the city for a while, and actually it was super because I got hooked up with the San Francisco Mime Troupe, which is a political theater, and I was in massive activist mode then. We were going after nuclear testing in the Nevada desert. If you believe it, they were testing atom bombs under the outside of Las Vegas. So much.
That's wild.
Casinos would sway, and with horrible radioactive elements everywhere. So
where was in the 80s the big testing was in was it Los Alamos in New Mexico or something?
Of course, in the 60s it was open air testing, which was the worst.
Right.
We watch Oppenheimer. Well, that's kept on going for 10 years. Thank God the women mostly of the early 60s, they found cobalt in breast milk, and they went, we are not having atmospheric testing. And they had some bombs that went wrong in Bikini Island, and just horrible, especially with hydrogen. And there's a really interesting thing in Oppenheimer, how they deal with should we push to hydrogen? Oh, no, we shouldn't do that. Well, they were right to say that, but Teller really got them to do hydrogen. Anyway, by the time, years later, in the 80s, and they're still testing nuclear weapons underground in the States. And Martin Sheen and a lot of the nuclear freeze movement in those days, we wanted to push back on the Reagan agenda, which was MX missiles and all this stuff, and stop effing nuclear testing and stop building this stuff. If you look at Hanford Reservation up in Washington, or in the one that's in North Carolina, is that right? Where's that? What's that?
I'm not familiar with North Carolina too much. Savannah, Georgia.
Savannah, Georgia? Yeah, maybe it's farther south. It's where Prince of Tides was about. Did you ever read that book?
I did, yeah.
Yeah, it's where that...
I think it was Georgia.
Yeah. Anyway, so I got caught up in that, and we did a lot of... And the other thing that was going on was they were sending weapons down to Central America out of the Concord Naval Weapons Station. So I was in full activist mode. And I think at some point in that activist, I realized that some of my activist friends, who were the bravest people I know, but were deeply, deeply angry, as they had a right to be. But that was defining their life, anger. And anger is, as we learned at acting school, it's an important thing to have in your palette. But if you let that be your whole life, it could destroy you too.
Absolutely, yeah.
Such a powerful force.
Can be really toxic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What happened to Darth Vader? It's like,
Oh no. Yeah.
like. So I backed off from that. I had, I guess about that time, John contacted me, my rock climber cousin, and he said, "Could you help me start my business in Flagstaff?" He was doing portaledges and haul bags. And I thought, this is what I need. I go river rafting and rock climbing. I need to get out of the city.
So in your early days in Palo Alto with your parents, did you spend a lot of time out in nature? Like, did you go skiing? Like, you've been quite close to the mountains. Like, obviously California, you grew up outdoors in a lot of ways. Like, was that part of your early upbringing? Yeah. So being in New York must have been hard because there's not a lot of nature in New York City.
Yeah, and New York City, and even upstate New York, nature sort of everything was cut down for farmland, and so you have like second and third and fourth growth trees. It's not quite as resonant as the Sierra Nevada was. I mean, there's a lot of second growth forest there, but there's something kind of epic about the West and the wilderness. There's a lot of wilderness still left. It's harder to find on the East Coast. So I did miss it, and I wanted to come back.
That's interesting, though. You missed it and then recognized it and came back, and then you started working with your cousin doing exactly what was kind of like building up inside you without you even really recognizing it.
I didn't recognize
Yeah.
it. And he had just come back from, I don't know, climbing Trango Tower in Pakistan or something, and all of his friends were just so deep in living outdoors, and I really wanted that. So that's what I filled myself with that energy. And at some point, my New York friends called and says, "Hey, we're all moving to LA." And I kind of missed the city. And I said, "Okay, I'll go to LA for a couple months and hang out with my friends."
So how long were you in Flagstaff? How long were you working outdoors and being kind of connected with nature?
Under a year,
Okay.
a year, something like that.
Just to get a feel for it again.
It is. And, there was a lot of, even in the competitive, and I don't want to speak for my cousin, for John, but there's so much competition between, especially the men in those days. I mean, it was so impossible for women to get a foothold. I mean, Lynn Hill, there were some great women from that generation, but the guys, there's so much competition. Todd Skinner, like, who's going to be the first guy to climb and who's going to get the sponsorship money from North Face or Patagonia. And I think it took away from some of them ability just to enjoy their sport in the pure sense.
Yeah, once the finances get involved in any kind of holistic pursuit, it does get muddied a little, doesn't it?
Yeah, it gets muddied.
Yeah. That purity of being out in nature and just being on a rock wall by yourself. And
Were you ever, like, I know you're a storyteller in outdoor stuff. I saw that you did some first ascents or something like that where there's some climbing in your history.
yeah, so what happened to me was I moved to Shanghai, China when I was like 22, 23. And China at that stage, it had like 30 million people. So here I was, finding myself in this massive city and everything was going up in Shanghai. Like, average salaries were going up, GDP was going up, housing prices were going up, car ownership was going up. Like being in China from like 2000 to 2015 was like being on a rocket ship. You were just trying to hold on for dear life. And it was really exciting and it was really fun. And it was a great time to be working as a journalist because there were so many stories and so many kind of development stories that, you and I, for example, missed out telling here in the United States because it happened so much earlier. This kind of like economic miracle, right? So it was very exciting. But then I also felt the pressure of being in the city all the time. And I missed kind of those athletic pursuits that I used to have. And then I met up with a friend of mine and we started going out to Tibet all the time. And we started going on these like 7, 10, 12-day hikes through the Tibetan mountains. And we started, doing all this adventure trekking and just fell in love with it. And then eventually I was like, I should start filming this because I love doing it. And these are places that most people don't get to go. So people might want to watch them. And can I be charismatic enough on camera? Maybe. Do I know how to use a camera? No, but my best buddy does. And I got him to kind of follow me out. And then it kind of ended up working. And I've never done any first ascents or free solos or anything that kind of crazy. I've always done pretty established routes when it comes to climbing, but we've done some 7,000 meter peaks, which is like 24,000 feet, and filmed it and made entire episodes out of it. So for me, like the filming element of it was really important. I wanted to, do high quality mountains at high altitudes, but also make sure that we could film it and tell the story of the people, the place, the guides, the porters, and kind of give a 360 degree story of what that experience was like from kind of start to summit.
Yeah. Those were.
Yeah, no, thank you. There was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
The toughest ones were actually not so much the mountains. The toughest ones were the deserts, because when you're climbing a mountain, you're dealing with weather, you're dealing with altitude. But the thing that really disturbed me being out in the wild for days or weeks on end was the feeling of progress, right? So walking across a desert is mind-numbing because when you're walking, you look to your left, you look to your right, you look behind you, everything's the same. And you don't know why you're going this way and not that way, but you're following a guide and he seems to know where he's going, right? He or she. But when you're climbing a mountain, you feel the progress. You're going up, you're going up, you're going up, and you're putting in that effort on a daily basis, and you're feeling yourself go higher. It's getting exciting. You build in this adrenaline, this excitement from achieving your goal and being able to see it and feel it. But in the desert, you feel completely hopeless almost all the time until it's finished.
Right. Yeah, desert has always seemed a very daunting place. Yeah. I'm never sure that I want to spend time in the desert. And then you go to Joshua Tree, and you can't believe how fulfilling it is. Just the boulders or even the Black Rock Desert. Even in the middle of a Burning Man festival, you can feel how powerful that desert is. So I'm drawn to it in a way, but it doesn't market very well.
No, it doesn't, especially if you're trying to move through it, right? If your entire, emotions are based on progress and you can't feel the progress or see the progress, it definitely tears you down.
Yeah. And then it's got to be true for a South Pole expedition and any place where you can't have no horizon or something like that.
Yeah, I think those are kind of more more mentally difficult. So from Flagstaff, you went to LA to catch up with friends, and that ended up being like a 25-year journey?
Saying, well, if I'm going to do acting, if acting was the right thing, if I want to get to directing, I can't ignore LA. And LA at least is closer to the Sierra Nevada and to the outdoor stuff you're talking about.
And close to mom and dad, right? They were still in Palo Alto?
Parents were up in the Bay Area. And, I guess at the end of the day, I'm a California guy. So I came out here and it was really, I just couldn't believe, that I was living in Los Angeles. But here I was. And I was having a great time.
And what did you fall into first?
Improv.
Okay.
Yeah, we had a great improv company. And improv's so nice because you're making up stories, right?
On the fly, it's the best. Yeah.
You're connecting with people, and there's lots of laughs, and it's all very ephemeral. And there's some writing, but you try not to be a writer when you're an improviser, unless you're doing sketch comedy. So that was super rewarding. But what was not rewarding for me was auditioning and playing that game. And where do you fit in? And Jesus, if I'm going to be a breakout actor, I need to have a good audition. And I got cast as a Russian sailor in Red October.
Oh, The Hunt for Red October with Alec Baldwin and Sean Connery.
Sean Connery was our captain.
Oh, really? That's amazing.
It was amazing. And actually, I was in Calistoga when I got the call with and I said, okay, we got to go to LA. I'm going to go back. I canceled my date and everything. We came back, and we're all on the set of Paramount. And I thought, well, I'm on my way. And we're trying on our little Russian sailor suits. And in the background, in the movie version, there's like a school bus pulls up. But it's a Russian school bus with Russian colors on it. And out of the bus comes these Russian sailors, real Russian sailors.
Oh, wow. That's epic.
And the AD, I remember his name because it was such a bummer. But then Steve O'Dadler comes up and goes, hey, guys, I'm really sorry. We've decided to use real Russian sailors.
And they cut you?
Yeah, but we're going to pay you for coming in today. And thanks a lot. And so, yeah.
But you didn't get to meet Sean Connery.
No, meeting Sean Connery. No, 2 months on a submarine in Seattle. No. And I thought, I cannot take the lack of control and that acting can really be.
It's amazing, isn't it? It's a total mind shift being an actor and just waiting for people to tell you yes or no.
I was best friends with Sean Connery in my mind. And then I'm sitting on the curb at Paramount going, wow, this is a really tough business. So that's when I left for Europe. And I left because at the time, the Russians had just, speaking of Russians, the Russians had just been kicked out of Czech Republic. I mean, thanks to Gorbachev, they pulled out of Czechoslovakia, East Germany, all these places. And I wanted to to cover the Velvet Revolution. And my friend was working for MTV News and got me a job interview in London because I had some film school experience. And I wanted to go cover the fall of the Berlin Wall.
As a videographer or as a yeah,
$500 a month.
Wow, not bad.
You're on, go for it. I'm out of LA, whatever it takes. So that like you know, going overseas kind of like gave me a lifeline, and it sort of ended up reinventing myself a little bit.
That's amazing. So you went from London to what? Straight to
Prague.
Prague.
Prague. And as I arrived, of course, the way fantasy works sometimes, I thought, well, I'm going to be staying in the apartment like they had in Amadeus, the right with the view or the age of no. It was like a horrible Soviet-style apartment building with open elevators without, it was like really pretty Soviet feeling.
Yeah, that would have been wild though to be there in like the mid '80s and to feel all that.
Yeah, it was this would have been 1990.
Okay.
At this time, and yeah, and Czechoslovakia, now of course the Czech Republic, but a guy who had been in prison for years, Václav Havel, a playwright, he got out and he led the popular movement, one of the leaders of the popular movement. He became the new president of Czechoslovakia.
Okay.
So he went from jail as a playwright, dissident playwright, to be the president of this country. It was amazing feeling. The people, it was a liberation after years of oppression with secret police and everything else.
And you were there covering that story.
You were covering that story, yeah. And of course, Americans were heroes. Unlike the Vietnam experience, in so many places where America, you felt like a pariah as an American. In Eastern Europe in those days, you felt like you were one of the good guys. And that was a great feeling.
Yeah, that would have been. It's totally opposite today. But
I know.
I still, I remember like going on like my first backpacking trip, and I did have that Canadian flag on my backpack just to let people know that I wasn't from the U.S.
That's sad. I mean, they have to do that sometimes. But yeah, we have a complicated history, and to own it is part of it, but you don't want to be foolish about it.
Yeah.
Where, depending where you are.
So did you make it to Berlin for the fall of the Berlin Wall?
Funny you should ask that.
Well, I'm the guy asking questions. This is how we go. This is how we roll.
No, I didn't.
Oh, what happened?
We were in Prague, and actually, well, of course, the wall didn't fall in 1 minute, right? It was taken down by everybody, but famously, Pink Floyd was going to do a concert there
at the wall.
At the wall as it was coming down. So we all had train tickets, and we were going to like go up. It wasn't like an overnight train or something, and somehow our car broke down, and on the way to the train station or something, and we ended up at this farmhouse way out in the Czech. But everybody, the farmers, everybody was so excited about the Berlin Wall coming down that someone took this Soviet-era television set with like this, like a 1/4-mile extension cord and knocked down a whole bunch of corn in their field. And we had like 40 people watching it on a black and white TV set in the middle of this cornfield.
Oh, that's almost as good as being there.
It was amazing.
Yeah.
It was really amazing. So, I mean, that's one of those things you have to just get over your sense of deprivation or entitlement and try to just accept whatever happens.
I remember similar, not exactly as a monumental moment as the falling of the Berlin Wall or whatever, but I remember I was in Beijing. Living in China, but I was in Beijing for the 2008 Olympics, and I was doing something for the Wall Street Journal, and they were telling me, yeah, they're going to get me into the stadium for the opening ceremonies and blah blah blah, and I was like, okay, that'll be fun, right? And then like the day before, I got an email like, oh, we can't get you into the stadium, but we got another assignment for you. You're going to walk around all the local neighborhoods around the stadium to shoot how local Beijing people are experiencing the opening ceremony. So I have a photo that was on the front page of the Wall Street Journal of the back of a TV and like 100 faces all around this one television in this little alleyway in Beijing, and they're all watching the opening ceremonies. And, it's like August in Beijing. It's hot, sticky. Guys are there with their T-shirts off, with their bowl, eating some noodles and stuff like that. And it was just such a nice kind of moment. When you said your story, that hit me right away.
That's a very good corollary. Yeah. It reminds me as a filmmaker that, at a fireworks show, the best pictures are usually of people watching the fireworks.
Yeah.
Or seeing the reflections in their eyes and things. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, good story. Well, Did you ever get to see some of the games?
Yeah, I saw some of the events and stuff like that. Saw the basketball, but as a tourist, as a paying spectator, not as part of the journalism thing. I was just there for the opening and closing ceremonies, and maybe a few little stories along the way. Because obviously, the build up to the Olympics in China was a huge story internationally. Because China made a lot of promises about getting the Olympics, about maybe being more open, more democratic, more freedoms of speech and things like this. But of course, none of that happened. So by the time the Olympics kind of came and went, everyone was just like, well, this isn't the China that they all said that they were going to be coming. And that was a whole nother tangent of stories that we kind of followed about, the Iron Fist still kind of remaining strong in China.
Yeah, if we're filming in China, I hope, for our new documentary, but definitely staying away from the politics of it. We're exploring the future.
Oh, that's going to be huge. Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah, China is way ahead of the pack on batteries. So I haven't been in China since 2012, and I was going to ask you earlier, when we were there in 2012, the air pollution was terrible in Beijing, and even in Shanghai it was pretty bad, but certainly, and then if you went out to Zhejiang in the middle of the country, really, really bad. What was your experience with air pollution?
I mean, I was there for 18 years. I saw it all, from absolutely terrible to, manufactured clean air for the Beijing Olympics, where they shut down all the factories within a 500-mile radius for the opening ceremony, so all the tourists and dignitaries wouldn't smell the iron ore and the steel pollution from the processing plants. No, I remember laying in bed in Shanghai some nights, and because what they would do is in China, the electricity is cheaper at nighttime than during the daytime. During the daytime, you have a lot of factories and things like that.
Sure.
Yeah. But at nighttime, they would run the big smelly factories to get also cheaper electricity. So you'd be sitting around at night in Shanghai and you'd smell just these chemicals coming through the air. It's just awful. That was at the worst. And then what the game changer was in China was the U.S. Embassy in Beijing started publishing daily readouts of the PMI particles in the air every day, and they were going toe to toe with the official Beijing readouts, which were all politically manipulated. And this really started to change the air quality in Beijing, because it just became embarrassing and kind of not acceptable. And then of course I haven't been to China since 2019, since before COVID, so I have no idea what to expect now.
I've heard that they've really cleaned up the air. In fact, they picked up some of the California Air Resource Board standards that were painfully enacted and partially enacted over the last 20 years. So the air has really cleaned up a lot into the big cities.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't know the U.S. Embassy story. I had read that the U.S. Embassy was doing that, but there's also a lot of officials that live in Beijing. Nobody wants to have their kids go to school. I don't care what your politics are. I mean, air pollution sucks. So I want to go back and see what the air pollution is like, because I've heard that it's a lot better than it was.
Yeah, will you be looking at BYD, the world's largest electrical car makers?
So.
Yeah,
BYD and Pyle, CATL, the big battery manufacturers. This will be the third, well, really probably the fourth film. We had a film about electric motorcycle racing. You did motorcycle racing?
I didn't do motorcycle racing, but I set a Guinness World Record for the longest motorcycle trip in one country when I did a TV show called Tough Rides China, where my brother and I did a big motorcycle trip around China. Okay. And that was pretty fun. So I love motorcycles.
Okay. Yeah. Well, we had one of our films. This will be electric car. We had Who Killed the Electric Car in 2006. And
I saw that on the bio, yeah.
Okay, yeah. And then Revenge of the Electric Car, 2011. And now we want to do one more, Rise of the Electric Car, where we don't know what our title is, but it'll really be What About the Battery? And not just the battery for cars, but the battery for everything that moves, from skateboards to airplanes to, let's get into batteries.
Yeah.
So it's been kind of a fascinating process to try to make that story interesting.
And what's the format? Is it going to be like a 90-minute doc or 60-minute doc? Or yeah.
It's one reason we're doing a podcast right now, and we're working with Jeanette, is to rebuild our audience and think about, our audience from 2006 is, still some of it, but we have to start from scratch and think about, what are people interested in? How do people consume stories? Is it 1-minute TikTok videos? Is 90 minutes like to do, jazz music when rock and roll came out? But it is a format that I really love, because you can build kind of an emotional arc in a 90-minute or a 2-hour documentary. And so hopefully we can do that.
Yeah, hopefully. It's sad how our attention spans have shrunk, but there still is an audience, I think, for longer form, proper storytelling, and I hope that stays. And I think that the way that we have to package things now is obviously have our main product, which will be that 60 or 90-minute doc, and then have all these bits and pieces, to advertise, to get people to come back to watch the entire thing. I think that's part of it.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, you could flip that around and say, well, people, their attention span might be shorter, but people have a lot more things going on in terms of like what they're paying attention to. And so our job as storytellers is to think about how we can really be concise with a message. And if we get people to say, hey, I want to see a whole piece from this filmmaker, then that's our reward, that the audience will say, okay, I'll watch your whole thing. But yeah, we have more to do to get there.
Yeah, and obviously the competition is fierce when it comes to eyeballs and attention.
Yeah, okay. So let's talk about that on the podcast.
Oh, just keep that a little.
Oh, sorry. On the podcast, we started thinking about doing that, and we're going to launch this summer. But I had to get over this idea about an audience, and say that, maybe there is no audience for a podcast that we're going to make. Like,
I've had that fear forever.
Yeah. But that stopped me for a long time from even thinking about doing it, even though I love the format of being able to interview people and listening and all that. And then there's a lot of paintings that nobody ever saw. And, and even the most famous movie of 100 years ago, only, 100 people know about it anymore. So everything's so ephemeral. So maybe just do work for yourself that matters, and trust that if there is an audience, they'll find you.
Yeah, I think there's a stand-up comedian that I quite like, and he kind of described it best. And people were asking, like, well, you travel every weekend to a different part of the United States doing your stand-up, 2 shows a night, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Why are you doing a podcast Monday to Thursday? And he's like, well, I don't really monetize it, and I don't really need to do it. But he described it as kind of like building a house for his audience, and the podcast is some place where everyone can come in, and they can learn about his tour dates, they can learn about his friends, they can learn about his Netflix special coming out or something like that. They can learn about where he's going to be next week, in Tulsa, Oklahoma, or Miami, Florida, or whatever. And he just described it as kind of like being a home for everyone that's interested in knowing what's going on in between, the once a year where his 1-hour stand-up show comes out. And it's just bringing people in and keeping them in. And, the whole world is kind of turning into these islands of personalities that also create things and tell stories. It's, we no longer have this like blanket storytelling that we just all are watching the same thing all the time. We're all just following people that we like or respect or find attractive, and we eat what they eat or what they sell to us, and we watch what they sell to us.
Sure.
And we're becoming, it's more of like a silo entertainment consumption.
Yeah, I think that's a healthy way to think about it.
Yeah.
I mean, Jeanette and I talk about this all the time, like why that might even be better. I guess we haven't had that specific talk, but before, it's like the Walter Cronkite or those limited things. Maybe it's better there's more influencers.
Yeah, maybe as long as they're doing things with some level of integrity. I mean, there's a lot of people out there that are quote unquote like influencer journalists, or they're reporting on things that journalists would normally report on, and they're not doing it with the same level of journalistic standards. And I think that's, or they're doing it, because they're being compensated by someone who wants to push an agenda. And I think that's the biggest fear, because that is not evident in the actual storytelling sometimes. And I think, especially in places like China or Iran, or in places where there's not a lot of media freedom. And, I remember at one stage there were reports of the Chinese government, and I'm using this example because I lived in China for so long, where the Chinese government was paying bloggers, to report on various stories in the way that and there was a lot of like citizen journalism that was being swayed with money. So that always scares the hell out of me.
Yeah. Well, I mean, even in the good old days of classic journalism, there was a lot of corruption as well, and who's controlling the advertisers, and or just big socioeconomic things. You're just hearing the point of view of a white guy in their 40s or came from Yale or something. You're not hearing from someone that grew up in Plano, Texas. And so, I don't know. It goes back, ultimately this is beyond our control in a way, isn't it?
It is, because either we can't stop the tech, although the government's trying to ban TikTok at the moment. So that's interesting.
That's a mistake. That's a lot of drama right now.
It could be. But that, so many people get their news from TikTok. So many people learn things on TikTok. Like it's very interesting to see, where the algorithm stands, how it's affecting young people, and then where the data actually is and who's controlling it. It's all very murky.
The scarier thing for me is if we have bots running all of our TikTok feeds and news, and then we don't know who the AI and what the AI is up to. And we've had a film about that, as well as I'm sure you read about in our bio. But AI it's pretty. It could be great. I mean, it already is great, but it could also be pretty scary when it controls information.
Yes, and who writes the code, who feeds the machine with what information, how what are the biases that are attached to the coding and stuff like that. It's terrifying.
Yeah.
I mean, how many doomsday scenarios have we had where AI took over the world, and not in a good way?
That was one of the challenges we had in our film, was how to handle doomsday scenarios around AI and not to be adding more fear to the equation, which is, I mean, as storytellers, how are we going to tell stories with humor, fear, da-da-da-da-da-da. It's one reason that I'm doing this podcast is that I love Kurt Vonnegut.
Okay, yeah.
And I think he's a really great tone of voice for dealing with existential risk like we have. Because you have the boy who cries wolf. I think this is a problem with environmental documentaries is we have too many, this is our last chance. And then if you go a little deeper, you go, well, really, how do you know it's our last chance? And then, well, what if it's already too late? Should we just do nothing? So I think there's a lot of stuff about fate and free will that is beyond our control. So what we can control is what we do, what we make, how we interpret things.
My only caveat into that space is, from 2015 to 2019, I probably spent 150 to 200 days a year living in a tent out in the middle of nowhere. And
Okay.
and all I can tell you is nature always wins.
Nature wins.
Yeah. So when nature's tired of us, nature will fucking kill us off in a heartbeat. I promise you. The weather will change, something will change. Nature will just be like, these people are bothering me, and it's time for them to go.
And there's nothing we can do about that.
Nothing. We're so helpless.
Yeah.
And we think we're so smart.
Well, I think this is one of the reasons that the apocalypse stories are overdone, and the guilt about it is too strong. There's a certain level of species destiny. I love Bill Bryson's book, The Short Concise History of Everything, or something.
Yeah, the Australian travel writer, right? Is it Bill? He's American.
No, I think he's English.
He's British,
or university or something. Yeah,
but he's written like 50 books.
Yeah. He wrote about biology and stuff. But yeah, we're just one more experiment on Earth. This is why the original idea for our podcast was to call it Nice Try. It's like
I like that. Yeah,
I liked it too. I've been carrying that around for 20 years. But we have a new title.
Okay, which is what?
Please accept our apologies.
I like that too. Yeah.
Yeah. It's from the Vonnegut quote, dear future generations, please accept our apologies. We were rolling drunk on petroleum.
That's really it, isn't it? I mean, like when you think of all the past civilizations, all the past generations, we're really living in the first, like the baby boomers and maybe the generation before them. They're really the first people to leave our world less than when they inherited it. And I think that is really something powerful.
So I thought about this too, especially after we said, okay, this is going to be the title of the podcast. What about apologies and remorse? And has there ever been a generational apology? I mean, I'm technically a baby boomer born in 1961. And no, baby boomers have never officially apologized to, the generations.
They're too busy buying houses that we all can't afford.
Pretty busy. Please stop bothering us with your concerns. But remorse turns out to be a very powerful thing to bond people together. It's a kind of empathy. And as my friend Coburn said on our first episode, he goes, if someone says to you, hey, I have to apologize about something, it doesn't matter what's on your phone or who you're talking to. You are going to give them 100% of your attention.
Yeah, because it's going to be a good one.
Yeah, because you want the connection. You want to hear, what was done wrong to you and why they're sorry about it. So I'm hoping that there's some healing in this show. We'll see what happens.
That's good. You need to find what was it, Nixon's Secretary of Finance who depegged the U.S. dollar from gold. What was that, like 1972 or 1973?
Wait, what did he do?
When they depegged the U.S. dollar from the gold standard?
Oh, yeah.
That's something that someone should apologize for.
Dang. Well,
we'll find that guy.
Anymore. He's probably already passed on. But,
Probably.
There's plenty of apologies. I mean, just the fact that you can't drink from rivers. And I mean, there's so many things on the environmental side that are, some of them were preventable. And I'm not a doom and gloomer because why be a doom and gloomer when we get to be alive?
Yeah.
But
being alive is better.
For you.
We are indeed. Okay, so hold on. So you're in Prague. You're in a cornfield when the Berlin Wall falls.
Yes.
How did you end up getting back to LA? How long did you stay in Europe for? Did you cover any other stories?
Oh, well, I think I was there for another 3 or 4 months, and then I came back to the States. And
so was your contract with MTV over by then? Or did you quit? Or
no, it was a show. It was called Buzz, and we had 2 seasons. Mark Pellington was the showrunner, director, great director. He ended up doing Arlington Road, very competent, great, terrific man. But they canceled the show after 2 seasons, and we were like news episodes within that show. And then I came back here and I got a job working for the screenwriter Michael Tolkien.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. And Michael had just finished The Player with Robert Altman. And I thought, well, my ship had come in because New York, Michael's a great Village Voice writer for years. He'd written this brilliant screenplay. Robert Altman had made even a more amazing movie. And so I worked for Michael while he made a film for Oliver Stone, and Janet Yang was our producer then. A very young Janet Yang. Now she is president of the Academy. I saw her on TV the other night. I went, oh my gosh, that's my old boss.
That's amazing. So you came back to the United States and got into writing.
Well, I wanted a Hollywood job and to get into directing, to work for directors. So I started working.
Okay, and that was it, like writing, writers, assistants, etc.
Writers, I mean, the directors are really, unless you're going to willing to trudge through commercials, which I was not willing to do, then you better get your writing chops together. And I think because I was not an effective writer on some sense, at least in fiction, I moved into nonfiction because I have a good sense for what truth is. And in documentaries, you can follow different truths and you can put them together as they happen into a story. And when the Writers Guild and everybody started having a screenplay on writing, because really a documentary you are writing because the way you're organizing information.
And of course, you're not like controlling the content, but you're positioning it in a way which tells the full story for sure. Yeah, no, that's super important. That's wild that you came back. So you've done acting. You've done some directing. You want to be a director. Then you were a news cameraman.
Yeah. And
then you came back to write.
Yeah. My career is built on failure, but
that's the best way to build it. Yeah. That's it, man. I think it was who was the great politician that said success is striving from failure to failure with what great excitement or passion or something like that.
Who said that? Yeah, it's good to have a couple wins along the way, and I think we had a couple wins along the way, but you have to be able to put up with a lot of things not turning in. And I think that's why it took us a long time to get this podcast, because I got hung up on wanting to have a successful audience experience. Because once we had our films that did very well, suddenly you're thinking, oh, well, how can I make sure I have millions of people watching it? And that's not a healthy meme.
No, it's when you start thinking about the success of something before you've put it out.
But what does it say? Beginner's mind?
Yeah, or work backwards. Yeah, and I love that too. It's just okay, the audience is going to see it, and if they like it, they'll find it. Yeah. But I started working, when I thought about building out a podcast, I thought specifically about the guest experience. So, I'm new to Los Angeles. I have a very colorful background, but I still don't know a lot of people here. So how can I communicate with people in a respectful way to get them to want to learn more about me and to want to sit down where I can learn more about them? And then how do we manage, a camera system and audio where the audience can also, pick up on the good energy and the positivity of having a great guest and having me, answer questions and talk about life and our creative journeys. And I kind of worked backwards from that. And then the other thing too is I wanted to make sure I could do it all by myself, so that if someone like yourself says, hey, I'm going to see you at 3:00 on a Wednesday, that I don't have someone calling in sick to produce or something, and then me having to go to you, I need to reschedule, which would have broken my heart.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. Well, I mean, here you are, one-man band, and you're doing such a great job. I love your on-air.
Thank you. Keeping it going.
It reminds me of that the George Clooney movie where
Up in the Air.
Oh, there you
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where he's he fires people for a living. Remember that?
Yeah.
That was beautiful. So, okay, so you come back and you're working as a writer. When do you start producing and directing your own stuff? Like when do you take that leap from assisting a great writer and getting to work on some films to actually having someone trust you with material to tell your own version of that?
Well, the short version of the story is I worked for Michael for a couple of years and then for a couple of other different productions in town. And I was feeling increasingly frustrated, like I had been as an actor, that I wasn't moving my career forward. I wasn't making any money. And I'd seen CD-ROMs come and go. And having grown up in Palo Alto, I had a lot of interest in engineering and tech. And I went to a Convex in Las Vegas, and I saw a demonstration of the World Wide Web.
This is going to change a few things.
This is going to change a few things, and I'm not going to miss out on it like I did CD-ROMs. And I'd read Marshall McLuhan's book, Understanding Media.
Yeah, I've read that, yeah.
It's an amazing book, and in fact, from the 60s, that every kind of media affects the nervous system in different ways. And so it was pretty obvious that the internet was going to just transform everything. So I started a company called Internet Outfitters, and the idea being we'd be like the Levi Strauss of the gold rush. We would help companies get onto the internet. So suddenly I'm doing business, and we ran that company for about 6 years, got up to about 50 people, and sold the business. And I suddenly had a lot more freedom.
Yeah, that's amazing. So that's interesting. So you were frustrated with your entertainment career in LA, and then you used your tech background and your interest in tech to build out a company and then you sold it. So now you've got a bit of cash in your pocket and you don't have to work and take jobs you don't want to take. And that, I think, is the key to all great creative pursuits, right? Is having that freedom to pick and choose what you want to throw your energy into.
And I'll just say the company thing, what made the company successful was building a team of people. And on movies, one thing that's always frustrating is you get this great group, and then the film's over and everybody scatters. And the super thing about a startup company was you could keep working with the same people and keep building your team. And I had a great time until we were about 25 people. And then it became more people than I could keep track of emotionally. And we had to jump to more, regulations as a company and make sure we had a right HR department. It became more complicated, and it wasn't as fun.
Yeah, more red tape, right?
More red tape and more, running a big organization. And that's not what I like doing. I like knowing everybody that I'm working with, staying tight. And so, but it was the collaboration of working together with people that made it successful. I couldn't have made it successful on my own, not just being false modesty. I have good sales skills. I can read people pretty well, but I'm not a great engineer. You know what I'm saying? Just knowing, and you get people that fill in your other skills, and then you build something.
Yeah, everyone has to complement everyone else. I mean, the director can also operate the camera and also write the script and also manage the lights. And
you're doing a pretty job here. I wish I don't think I could do this.
Yeah, you just have to keep the finger going. That's the key.
You're very well. So anyway, that gave me a lot more freedom, and that's what got me into documentaries. I helped a friend on a documentary, Mark Neal. We worked with Ewan McGregor, who did that motorcycle.
Yeah, Ewan was a huge influence of mine. He did Long Way Round, Long Way Down, Long Way Up. And those journeys with his friend Charlie were inspirational. It helped me get into motorcycle adventuring too. It was beautiful.
So you saw that before your own?
Yeah, absolutely. I saw what they did. So Long Way Round came out a couple of years. Actually, Long Way Round and Long Way Down both came out before I did my trip.
Okay.
But I watched their journey and I loved it. And I thought the production quality was high. And having Claudio, who I met afterwards, and we had a beautiful lunch together at his home in London before he moved out of London, like he was a really sweet guy. And that really gave me the motivation. So instead of trying to do like this round the world trip like they did, I was like, what if I just focus on like one super interesting, diverse country? And then I was like, well, I know China better than anyone because I've been working for the New York Times covering China for a decade by this stage. So why don't I take people on an adventure around China? So then I brought my brother in and he was like, I've never been to China before. And I'm like, well, I'm the expert. Let's go on this 2-month journey around China and see what we see. And then we self-financed it and ended up selling it to Travel Channel eventually.
Wow.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah. Well, you're an amazing guy. And he narrated Faster for us, and then also Charge about electric motorcycle racing on the Isle of Man.
Mm-hmm.
And somewhere in this process, I had my electric car taken away from me by the General Motors.
Oh, really?
One of the first electric cars. And actually, I had gotten it when I was working at the company. It was sort of like one of my, fun things to do that wasn't the company, was to have an electric car. And then one day I got notice that I took my car down for maintenance, and they told me I couldn't have the car back, that they'd taken it away, but they gave me a coupon for a Saturn, a gas-powered car. And by this time, I had been driving an electric vehicle for 4 years, and I don't want to go back to a gas car.
So they had recalled your vehicle, basically.
They repossessed it.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, they repossessed it, and what the GM had done, they created an amazing vehicle with Paul McCready and Walt Ripple and all these folks. Amazing vehicle. They created some super believers, me being one of them, that knew that electric was the future for transportation. And nature wins because it's way more efficient than using fossil fuels, but another topic. And then they had the audacity to tell us that we had to give all these cars back, and they weren't going to support them anymore, and crushing them.
Oh, wow. That's crazy that they just recalled them, repossessed them, and then just gave you credit to buy a gas-powered car.
So good credit.
Yeah.
But we weren't impressed.
No, I bet.
And so I tried to get Nightline and some of the traditional magazine shows to do. We filmed all this footage for them. But we learned later that a lot of the television news magazine programs had been burned by running Firestone rollover tire. Remember the Firestone tires on SUVs? And it caused these rollovers. This was back in 2004.
I don't remember this.
And the car companies, as I heard from a local TV station, said, well, our advertising was pulled for 2 quarters, and they all went over to magazine advertising. So nobody wanted to run another story critical of the car companies that could risk their advertising. I mean, talk about how advertising influences journalism.
Sure. And nowadays the pharmaceutical industry runs linear television, and that's why you get what you get.
So we decided, well, let's make our own documentary. And I had just helped on these other documentaries, and that was my first documentary about what happened to our electric car.
And GM specifically.
GM became the biggest target because I had a GM EV1, but really Toyota was involved, Honda, Ford, all the companies that had electric cars on the road in the late 1990s, early 2000s, all sort of had participated together in getting these programs killed because it disrupted the dealer model for them, because electric cars don't have carburetors and brake jobs. It's like buying a washing machine, much easier. Much less maintenance, much less life cycle with the dealership.
Well, the dealerships, so I know, I talked to a few people who own some dealerships, motorcycles and cars, right? And they say like the margins you make on selling a vehicle is almost nothing, but it's the maintenance and the repairs where you make money. So if you have a car that doesn't need any maintenance or repairs, you're going to have owners of dealerships that are bankrupt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you talk to Tesla owners now, and they'll say, well, I take my car to a dealer occasionally. I have problems with it, but it's nothing compared to what you have on a gas car. It's just a much simpler device. So anyway, that led to the first film, and we just hit it right because, what's his name?
Elon Musk?
Not Elon Musk, but the guy who did Inconvenient Truth, the producer at eBay.
Yeah, you're right. What was his face? Al Gore was the face of it. Who did the directing?
Participant Films.
Yeah.
Jeff Skoll.
Okay.
The great Jeff Skoll.
Yeah.
who took his money from eBay. He came to Hollywood. I want to make some impact movies. And he did some amazing films. And he did Inconvenient Truth with a huge marketing budget.
Yeah.
Huge.
Massive.
I'm not the biggest fan of that film, although the content is amazing. But compared to our wonderful film from that year, however, the one thing it did do for our film was we were the trailer on Inconvenient Truth.
Oh.
And so we were put in 500 movie theaters thanks to his marketing budget. Everybody heard about our film, and we got a great audience for it.
That's wonderful. Yeah. Good stroke of business. And that was when you incorporated your current firm and that you've been running for, what, 15 years?
That's when we started Paper Cut Films.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Amazing.
So there you go. And then we took a break from transportation documentaries to do one about artificial intelligence a few years ago. And now we're doing one more about electric vehicles.
Amazing. Amazing. And how's it been, living in LA and absorbing all that LA is as a creative professional here?
We were wrong in San Francisco. And a lot of the problems that LA had in the 60s and 70s where growing up really transferred to the Bay Area, because suddenly, you didn't have Facebook stock at $2 and aren't you part of the Google revolution? And the money that flowed in was equivalent to the money that was in aerospace and Hollywood, when Hollywood was a much tighter circle. You were either in or out. And now I think LA is, from my perspective, and, obviously I had just one person, but seemed to be a lot wider set of people and different career opportunities here. And yeah.
Well, I think the tech has changed everything. Like the way people tell stories, the cost of telling stories has dropped significantly, and then having just multiple outlets has been a lot better. Have you, do you have any comments or suggestions about what it's been like working with, linear television partners versus streaming partners, or producing documentaries that go out through the bricks and mortars theater network versus, selling to a streamer or anything like that?
Well, I mean, our current business model, there is no real business model for documentaries.
No.
Because people expect, hey, I'm watching your documentary, don't make me pay for it. I mean, it's unfortunately, it's seen as a commodity. And so it's, unless you're running an IMAX movie in a science center, those movies make money, but they have they have a churn. So
on a little aside, did you see Darren Aronofsky's postcards from Earth at the Sphere in Vegas? It's incredible.
You have to go, by the way. Sure, okay, good. Here's what I would say about a business model. I think that let me clear my thought here.
No worries, because obviously, like, the residuals play such a big role in the life of creative entrepreneurs, right? Like, and I think that's why we just went through this whole writer strike and actor strike and things like that. It's because, when you do a deal with a streaming partner, you sell the rights for life. But when you go through traditional theater networks and linear television, they have to re-up your royalty, your licensing every few years, and then you get a little bit of a payout. And those kind of things help so much when you have like a 1-year strike that you have to sit around and do nothing during.
Well, like the thing that was frustrating for us documentary filmmakers, goes for narrative filmmakers too, is that you never knew how many people were watching your films once you sold them to a streamer. There was just a big black hole, and they wouldn't tell you. And I'm grateful for the writer's strike and for the actor's strike and pushing back on all that stuff and saying, hey, this got to be a new deal. We're done. You guys are established. You're rich. Let's have a fair shakes. In fact, on the Oscars, when they brought all the union people on, those really, I liked that a lot.
Well, look, I know you have to head out soon, but let's make sure we get this. Let's make sure we try to do this again. And I'd love to come out onto your podcast at some stage.
Okay, great. That'll be fun. Yeah.
And then here, look, we go to the wide angle, and we can shake it out.
Oh, shaking hands. Yeah. Okay, great.
Great to finally meet you. Thanks for swinging by.
Yeah, thank you for having me on.
And then look, fade to black, the production quality.
All right.
Thank you, boss.